will welcome everybody to the Provincetown Roundtable discussion for this year. Ideally, we would have these in person, but of course, we've had to scale back and do them all virtual. So this is our last one of an owner series that we've been doing over the past month or so. This is probably our seventh one that we've done, and this continued from the summer when we had just open Q&A sessions all around the pandemic over the summer. My name is Jim Reese. I'm with specifically today, also from We Need a Vacation, is Joan Talmadge. Say hello.
Hi.
And Elizabeth Whedon.
Hello.
So primary folks that if you pick up the phone and call the office, you will likely hear or speak to Joan or Elizabeth. And Lauren, you're here as well, so I'll introduce you, Lauren Binder over.
Hi, everybody.
I'm going to point. She's on my left-hand side. So let me jump in to a presentation, and like I said, then we'll open it up. I want to get feedback from folks here and get your insight into how last summer went and what your concerns are. But to start off, I'm going to share my screen for a quick presentation. Jeff, you there? Can you allow for sharing of my screen? I'm not a co-host, so maybe that's it. There we go. Got it. Great. All right, let me close this down. So, like I said, we're going to go through just a 2020 recap, look over some of the numbers. If you've been in some of the previous presentations, you might see some repeated stats, but worthwhile to review.
From Dopey Dave?
Excuse me? Oh, let me also do this.
Unmute him.
Yes, if you can. So to jump in, what we want to look ahead towards is what is 2021 going to be like? The most common question that we're facing is just trying to understand what 2021 will be like, which is very difficult given the uncertainties that we all face. We know what we went into 2020. At least we know what we were faced with 2020. There were a lot of changes that came out at the last minute, a lot of adjustments that everybody here, in order to manage their rentals and manage their guest expectations, had to make changes to their practices. And we know how that worked, and I think it's likely going to be similar to that. But again, there are going to be some uncertainties going into next year, which we'll continue to monitor as we go through the booking season. Looking back before talking about the rest of 2021 is want to look back at kind of what the demand was. And this is the chart that I've been presenting over and over due to just how well it reflects the demand that we saw once the pandemic hit. We saw things bottom out in March and April when everybody hunkered down, was on lockdown, and the uncertainty of whether a summer season was actually going to happen. You know, the rentals were not permitted at that time, and all these major events were being canceled, and so everyone was really on edge about whether there was ever going to be a season. And as soon as Governor Baker rolled out his plan to reopen the economy, and we saw that there were signs that there was going to be a summer, the demand certainly showed, and we saw that start to take off in May and then really hit record numbers. The numbers we hit in June, July, August hit numbers that we haven't seen in our 23-year history. They were near 3 times what we're normally seeing in the summer. So it was really just, I'm sure many of you got a flurry. If you had availability, you had a flurry of activity. If you had cancellations, which there were many cancellations due to COVID or due to travel, whatever that may be, those weeks that did cancel surely booked up last minute. And so we'll discuss how that might play out the following year. I also looked at numbers specifically for Provincetown, and the only adjustment here that I see, you see the same trend line here, except that July actually was the busier month over June. The rest of the Cape was peaking in June, but P-Town ended up seeing higher numbers in July, kind of similar to what we saw and talked about last week with Vineyard and Nantucket folks as well. I think that had something to do probably just with kind of, again, the demands of folks looking to get away during the summer and actually looking out into the early parts of the fall as well. In terms of the industry of what we're looking for, we're also sitting in a good position here. What we saw this past year, we saw an increase of 140% in our new vacationers. So there have been a lot of vacationers that have started to look for rentals where they may not have last year. They were looking for their own space. Maybe they didn't want to stay in a hotel, motel and share space or share a common area. We all realize as homeowners, we realize what we provide for guests when they get their own space, their own outdoor area, perhaps deck, whatever it may be. And so people were flocking to the rentals for this very reason. And so seeing so many people try out We Need a Vacation for the first time bodes well for you as homeowners. We're happy to see that too, of course, because we get now to market to a brand new set of vacationers to our website. We also looked at the trend moving forward. And so what was the trend during the fall? We had September through October comparison, and our traffic continues to be strong. Searches specifically for P-Town were 56% above previous year. And likewise, the inquiries continue to come at higher numbers than in the past. So, and momentarily, I'd like to get feedback on how everyone's looking for next year. And finally, we also are forecasting our bookings. So early bookings for next year. We ran these numbers through, I guess last week we ran these numbers, and looking at the Outer Cape specifically, we see a huge increase. And it's not just the summer. It's in fact, the spring and fall are showing higher booking numbers. This is reflected due to repeats, a lot of repeat businesses likely coming through this year. And folks are booking earlier and earlier due to, some clearly missed out last year. Some had a last minute, decide to go away locally and just couldn't find the home that they desired. So that's going to probably up the demand for earlier bookings this year. And that's kind of leads into the predictions here. That the demand, I don't expect to see June, July hit those record numbers. I think everything was so condensed last year. I think it'll spread out some more. I think you're going to have folks that are looking to plan their vacations early. They know what to expect with the pandemic, whether or not a vaccine is here. I think the restrictions are still going to be in place. There'll be plenty of people that are going to want to play it safe. They're not going to want to book long distance travel as much. And so they know, especially if they came last year, they know how that's going to work. They know they had a successful summer, and they're going to be looking to do the same thing. And so you'll see that demand, not just through the summer, but into the off season, as you see folks that are looking to, I think we were just talking right before we started, how there are folks that are just working remotely, and people are realizing, hey, I don't even need to take a week or two vacation or work remotely. I can do even longer remote work and stay in a rental. So that's kind of a quick wrap up of what we're seeing at this point. And what I'm going to do here is really turn it into a discussion amongst this group. Given that it's a small group, I have a slide here on how to raise your hand virtually, but I don't think we're going to need that today. Just with the small group, I think I can see everybody here. So I'm going to exit this presentation. And I need to stop share. All right, we got everybody back. So I think for the roundtable, and if you're muted, you have the ability to unmute yourselves and chime in at any time, so please do so. What I'd like to do is just get feedback from folks here. I think some of the things that we'd like to hear is, first question that I have for folks is just about rental management looking into next year. Because of all the COVID restrictions that we went into this year, some of those restrictions are going to persist. They're going to continue to exist for next year. I'm curious of what sort of changes did everybody make here due to COVID that you're going to continue into next year? And then others, what about things that you might have done this year that you thought a little bit were overkill and you'll scale back on? That we got some useful feedback from last participants in the Nantucket and Vineyard roundtables as well, but curious just what folks have done differently to help support their guests for COVID and what they're going to continue to do so. Does anybody want to chime in on their experience of what they're going to continue to do? Or Joan, do you want to chime in?
One
hold
Oh,
on.
I
Ross?
was going to say that one of the things that we did, but was kind of a challenge for us, was offer for people to bring their own linens. You know, and that was one of the early meetings I checked with, I was in on with you guys last year. However, in the beginning, it was, you know, we had 3 different rentals and having, you know, keeping track of we offered to provide the linens. And we also at one point offered to, or asked that they either rent linens. And the other thing we requested is that they do bring their own blankets, etc. You know, just because of the turnover challenges with those things. And just keeping track of who was doing what. And then we decided, in the beginning, we tried to keep it uniform and try to get everybody to bring their own stuff or rent, but then people were really not wanting to rent, especially at the rates they were paying and stuff like that. So we took that off the list, and just managing with the cleaners who was bringing what was the biggest challenge. But I think we'll continue with that at least through this summer, because normally we do offer full linens, towels, etc. like that.
So Ross, you are going to provide linens, you're saying?
We do, well, what we changed it to, instead of asking them to rent through someone else, we tell them you're more than welcome to bring whatever you want. We'll provide anything else that you don't want to bring. Some people are still feel more comfortable with bringing their own stuff, so we offer, you know, we have like a checklist. You know, do you want pillows? Do you want blankets? Do you want sheets? You know, towels, etc. So that's where it comes to be a challenge, and like telling the cleaners what to provide and not provide, and so, but you know, if it makes people feel more comfortable, then
right. No, that's the way to do things. Barry, do you have a comment?
We kept it really simple on the advice of our cleaners who own 100 and some houses and have strict COVID protocols. So one of the things we did was we posted what our COVID protocols were. We removed all of the extraneous pillows, the lovely pillows that make the place look so nice, on your advice, which was good, from the beds. I don't mean the head pillows, but the decorative pillows. Removed all those. We have double comforters, and so we would take one set off between groups, and if they were off for 3 or 4 days, the data shows there's no transmission possible. So then the next week it would be swapped. And the other thing we did is we went to duvet covers on those comforters. And so that way, if it wasn't possible to swap out the comforters, we could just take the duvet covers off, clean those, and put those back on. And that was a lot less cleaning to do than trying to clean the comforters themselves, which we typically don't clean during the season. And then we extended the cleaning time, the time between entry and between departure and arrival to 6 hours instead of 5. And those were the changes we made, and it was really quite easy. And mostly we let people know that we were going to be very careful and do all these things. And we never had any issues or anybody saying, oh, will you supply such and such? And we said, if you want hand sanitizer, you bring that. If you want wipes, you bring that. But we provide, here are all the things we provide.
So will you continue that, Barry?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason not to. It's so easy.
So you'll continue it even after the pandemic is over?
After the pandemic's over, we'll put the pillows, the decorative pillows back.
Right.
And we still may use duvet covers, but we won't necessarily swap out the comforters between guests. But we'll still keep the 6 hours just because why not? Makes it easier for the cleaners too.
Sure.
You can always make an exception, you know, if somebody needs to get in earlier or stay later or something, but I think it sounds like you're doing a great job.
We do that, but we also say, in the past, if anybody comes and they arrive before the check-in time of 3 or 4 p.m., they've been allowed to leave their suitcases inside. Sometimes they'll change to the bathing suits and go to the beach. We did not allow that this summer, and we won't allow that until after COVID is no longer an issue.
Yeah.
I think for the most part, guests were understanding of kind of the restrictions that were in place for safety, purely safety measures. And so understanding that there may be things that they need to bring themselves, and I've said this before, is that if that was in order to get away safely, they had to bring their own supplies of certain, or their own sheets, their own pillows, then that you're not going to get pushback on that. They're looking to get away, and and to do so safely. So you don't see that. And Barry, you mentioned just communicating that. I think that's another point that we've stressed over and over again, is that with all these changes, some guests may be used to a certain way, and this year it was a lot different. And also, all homeowners treat this a little bit differently. And so the number one thing that we stressed was just communicate with your guests prior to arrival. Make sure that they're aware of whatever sort of changes you're doing. If it's a repeat guest, especially, but a new guest, just, if they're not going to be allowed into the home before, make that clear so that they don't arrive with, all the bags and nowhere to change, and just, they need to know what to expect. And
then we changed two things in our agreement, which was that we're not responsible for any, if they get COVID, and that we put the CDC guidelines into place, things like that. And the change of time in the agreement. And we also asked for the names of everybody who was staying, the contact information, as opposed to just the primary renter.
Chris,
Jim says that communication. As Jim says, that communication is so important, and you alluded to it too, Barry, but especially this year when people were so nervous. I mean, it's hard to sort of almost remember now a little bit because we've gone through it and things really ended up so great. We'll ask you more about that. But back in April, May, even June, everybody, all of us, but especially vacationers, were so anxious. So a lot of our homeowners were going crazy coming up, looking into things and talking to their cleaners and really working hard to figure out, come up with strategies to clean their homes and deal with the linens. But then they didn't necessarily let their guests know. So it didn't defeat the purpose, but they were just missing that opportunity to give that peace of mind to their guests before they even got there.
We had a funny thing that I misunderstood a prospect's question. He wrote, "Do you have a separate entrance?" I thought, a separate entrance? Well, we have downstairs if somebody wants to be in the lower level and they can go out the slider in the back. And then I finally realized what he meant was it's a side-by-side duplex and you couldn't see the door in the pictures because of the hedge in front. What he was asking is, when you go into the building, are you mingling with the neighbor's entranceway? And the answer was no.
Yeah. But that's an example of something that he would have been anxious about,
Exactly.
And why, as Jim said, people prefer staying in a house rather than having the common area.
And I totally misunderstood the question, but.
Well, it's also the power of our site allows for that direct communication. We're not going to spill the communication or weed out email, phone numbers. We want you to, facilitate that communication with your guests and answer any questions like that and make sure there isn't anything lost in translation. Chris, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'm sorry I jumped on late and I don't know
no problem.
What topic we're on or specific. I have a 1-bedroom condo right in the center of town. I was fully booked with weekly rentals for the entire summer. A number of returnees, a combination. I love We Need a Vacation. I get the best clients and tenants from you guys. But Airbnb, Mr. B&B, and a number of direct. Everybody wanted to cancel when they heard Carnival was canceled, Bear Week was canceled. I could have been a real jerk. Just because one of those weeks canceled doesn't mean, your rental canceled. But I live in New York City, so managing it remotely, it just wasn't an option. I could not guarantee myself the comfort, let alone them. So every single person I worked out an arrangement with, basically the Airbnb wasn't so difficult. Mr. B&B was impossible because they just didn't want to refund stuff, but they ended up doing it. But with anybody I could speak with directly, I worked out a compromise or an arrangement, and they understood. Basically, I kept a quarter of, they paid a 50% deposit. I kept a quarter of it, or half of that 50%, The balance of that 50%, I gave them as a credit for this year with first right of refusal, excuse me, for 2021, to roll it over. And if they had paid any more, I refunded it. If they didn't, we left it as is. And everybody was accommodating with it. And honestly, I gave up the bookings for the summer. I mean, it sat there. I used it somewhat, but I just could not manage it from this end. And I was on a lot of your Zoom calls back in the spring, and I don't have a big house, and there was no way to do this turnover, linens, that, or whatever. What I did do though is, and this was at Joan's suggestion, is I put it up for long-term rentals, and that is all I have had. And basically, I have now pretty much made up, I have someone in right now. I do a 4-week minimum, although I broke my rule and gave this person 3 weeks, but I have pretty much made up my income that I lost this summer. And I already have a 3-month booking for next year. Somebody wanted a year next year, which I wouldn't do. But I've got 2 guys, they're all working remotely, they're all artists, they're all, you know, I only let 2 people in my unit anyway, it's not a party house, but I never rented off season in the last 10 years I've been renting because nobody ever wanted to pay real money. These folks are paying. And I am so glad I listened to all your, you know, these webinars. And I'm so glad I decided not to take any bookings, even though people were hitting me up constantly, and wait until in July. That's when I did my first long-term rental, and it has just gone straight through. So
Good for you.
I mean, I had to take a chance, but the income was important, but my peace of mind. And as soon as somebody asked well, what do you do to sanitize your place? I'm like, I just politely replied this in a nice way. This is not, or somehow I didn't say it's not for you, but I can't guarantee it, and I'm not going to do it. So here's the regulations, please follow them. I did put language in about if something happens, put that what you recommended, Joan, the virus, you know, whatever, it's in there. And people have been great. They really have. So I feel very fortunate.
Chris, do you have it professionally cleaned?
Yes.
So, I mean, that's all I would say.
Well, see, okay, what's considered pressure, and I don't mean to get in a long discussion, but I have housekeepers come in and do it. But are they a company? No.
Yeah.
Are they locals? Yes. Have they been doing it for years? Yes.
Yeah.
So am I going to say that I use this, that, whatever, specifically? No. I tell people there are linens there. Please bring your own. You're welcome to, or use them. You're welcome to wipe down every surface when you arrive. The only thing I did is throw out all staples, sugar, salt, pepper, anything that people left behind that we always did. But other than that, you know, I threw out magazines. I did the basic stuff, but I could not in a 4-hour turnover. And people coming for summer weekly rentals do not want to lose a day, do not want to be waiting. And it was just, it was really a matter of comfort for me. And that I just said, yeah, but it all worked out. So, but I have not taken a single booking for next summer yet. I've told people I will, those I said I'd give them first right of refusal, I will do that. On my personal website, on WeNeed, it's all blocked off right now, or I'll say, I'll contact after the first of the year, but I want to see what happens, you know, before taking any income in. Other than 3 months, these guys paid up front for 3 months, April, May, and June, which is amazing because I've never booked that before. So.
I think that the long-term rentals save the day for a lot of homeowners who just couldn't manage what you say, Chris, the turnover, the frequent turnover. And I'm wondering if other people here experience the same thing with any long-term rentals, successfully or not. Anybody else?
I just have a background question. A lot of your videos are posted. Will this also be posted?
Yes.
Does anybody else have a 1-bedroom that's on here?
I do.
Because that's what I think was my good selling point, is for a couple or a single person.
Right.
Rather than trying to organize their family with kids going in and out of school and all of that. So I got a Dartmouth professor in there now, like I said, an artist, a couple from New York. They know they're not going to be in an office until July. They have approval from their business to be there. So that's I think what really saved me, is having a small unit.
So I didn't get so many requests for long-term rentals. I got some for next summer, and I've got for a 2-week request for now, but and I have a question about what your recommendations are for pricing 2 weeks and a month rentals in comparison to weeklies. But I found actually that, April, May and June and in July all went away. But then when it opened up, I got lots of requests, and many of them were less than a week. Normally, July and August, I only take weekly rentals, but I ended up often taking 4 days because people were often doing it last minute, and I have a 3-bedroom, which sleeps 6. So people might not be able to look really far ahead. They would get their group together. So I end up doing more work. Not only, I refunded 100% of everybody who canceled, because that's what I would want. I had a wedding and I asked all my vendors to refund me, and they did. I planned a wedding, then I had a much smaller one, 14 people in person instead of 140 people in person. And they all refunded. And so that was my policy. But then when it opened up, I took ones that weren't full weeks, because that's what was out there that was available. That's what I found out people were interested in, as well as some full weeks. And I basically brought in at least 80% of the revenue, the gross revenue I was expecting to bring in.
Well, Barry, you asked about pricing for longer term rentals. I think that at least in the past, or this past summer and into this season, the demand was so high that homeowners didn't necessarily feel they had to markedly reduce the price of their home. Plus, many of them felt the need to send cleaners in, and this is something that we encourage, not to wait until the end of a long-term rental to have a cleaning crew come in, because they hate it. They say they can't really adequately clean it if no one has been in there. Plus, it helps to have somebody go in and just check to see how things are going and see if your home is in good shape. And the other thing is, if it's a 32-day plus rental, they save a lot on not having to pay the tax, which in E-Town isn't it 14.45%?
Right.
Yeah.
So when I took your advice when you said because I was asking you about the monthly spread from this to that, and you suggested making it larger, wider, go higher and come low. That worked out perfectly for this 3-month rental, because I started, it's easy to explain that it was whatever, I don't remember, 2,600 for that month. The next month I took 10% off. The month after that I took 50% off that I already reduced, and they loved it. They were good for it. So I appreciate you saying, don't be afraid, don't be hesitant, go up in it. I know I'm getting a lot of hits. I see it constantly now. And I may bring things down a bit, but I'm not afraid to anymore. I'm not nervous about it like I was at the beginning. So
yeah.
Well, I think the combination of there being a tremendous, unprecedented interest and popularity in longer term rentals, but the other thing, and we have a great blog post about it, us homeowners also actually do have increased risks with longer term rentals. So between both of those, it's absolutely worth considering. Oh, and the third thing I would say is, if it's early enough in the booking season, like now for sometime next year, why would you start low? Why not at least start out now somewhat, at least on a spectrum towards the more aggressive. If you're not getting any inquiries and so forth by January or something, you can start backing off then.
I did have a very good Zoom call with this couple, these guys, for that booking, just to say they paid the deposit the first month, but I said, let's regroup in February and see where things stand. And I wasn't going to put it all in writing. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to, I said, let's just talk, and if things change and something happens, we'll come to a mutual agreement. And they were great about it, but
that's great. It's that communication again, that, if you feel comfortable doing that, how do you think they're going to feel? Now, some people are going to want certain things in writing, maybe, But don't you think that they are going to derive the same amount of comfort and trust?
Yeah,
that
I
you
mean,
do?
they have a lease. There is that, but
Right.
there's just a dialogue about it, and I'm not going to be a hard ass if it's impossible, for whatever reason, to can't, hopefully things are better, but, I'm very fortunate that New York and Massachusetts we're friends as far as traveling back and forth. Because that was an issue this summer, that Mr. B&B did not want to refund somebody who was in Chicago, who could not travel. But they still were adamant, it's not force majeure, whatever, it was not good. So I'm off their site anyway.
Well, looking ahead, one of the common questions we also start talking about is adjustments to cancellation policies. So, Chris, your cancellation, or your policy that you had last year to push people into the 2021 has likely gained you some repeat customers. You gained customers long-term, but how you manage your cancellation policies, we've said, is up to everybody. Everybody can do their own approach. There's the standard approach of not refunding anything unless you can rebook. But this year, I'm sure you're going to get questions when people have to inquiry. I don't know how many inquiries get sent where people are asking, well, what's your cancellation policy? And sometimes they just want assurance that if rentals are banned, or if the pandemic is in a place where it's just not safe to travel, they want to be assured that they're going to get their money back. Again, you can play it however you wish, but that generally people are looking for that kind of assurance. They're not looking for, let me book, I want to know I can still get out of it come June for a July rental. That's not necessarily what most people are looking for when they're asking those questions. But I'm curious if folks how they're handling their cancellation policies, and if they're adjusting in any way or providing a little more flexible cancellation policies going into this year.
I'll just say that I was actually over the summer, I was very flexible with people who canceled. I gave, as other people have said here, I gave everything back. I didn't want people feeling like they had to come, in the middle of all this. And it was, there was restrictions about people coming and all of that. I will also say that in general, even though I have a strict policy of, 30-day cancellation, if someone comes to me and says they don't want to come, I would rather give them their money back than have them come and not be happy in my home. I mean, that's sort of that's the unwritten piece of that I have always felt. If someone really doesn't want to come to my place, I'd rather they didn't come, and I'd rather they go in peace with just, here's your money, let's just go. I just had a situation happen with someone that had booked my place for the first weekend of December, and they had booked back in September. And so they booked back in September for the first week in December. And last week they canceled the reservation because of COVID. And, I very willingly gave the money back, but, I had to really start to think, like, is this going to become the default excuse to cancel? Is this just going to become the thing that people, oh, I'm scared of COVID, I don't want to come. Oh, I got to get my money back. So I don't know. I actually ended up having to stay at an inn in Provincetown because my place was rented and I needed to be there. And one of the things that the people specifically mentioned, one of the guys that owns the place, he said in his reservation system now, he specifically says, we will not give you your money back for a COVID cancellation unless there's a statewide ban on rentals. If you need to cancel, we will credit you for another stay, but we will not give you your money back. Like, that is now part of their regular spiel on cancellations, and it specifically refers to COVID. And I'm sort of thinking of doing that for next summer, like, in hopes that, we're going to be having a vaccine, and we're going to hopefully be coming to the end of all of this, that, if you're booking in January and then 2 weeks before you're supposed to come in July, you're telling me you're canceling because of COVID. I don't really know that next summer that's going to be hold much water for a cancellation, personally.
An alternative to that process, or that the way you are thinking of handling it, is to have a time frame, so that if they notify you, let's say 2 months in advance, and it's for a summer week that you are pretty secure in knowing that you would rebook it, then maybe you would return their money. If they notify you, 2 weeks prior to, then maybe you hold firm to your no cancellation, or you give them a credit.
Or even maybe just hold on to something so they have some skin in the game. So it's not just a whim for them. Oh, let's not go. You know?
I just had someone ask for the whole month of December and what my cancellation policies are. And it is now November 20th. And, you know, and it's like, what the hell do I say? You know, I mean,
no cancellation.
The Jim, I like what you said about if it's COVID, if they shut it down, that's one thing. Not that I'm insured and can get, but that's the way out. But I tried to come up with some friendly dialogue thing, and of course didn't hear back. But it was a tough one because I would love to book the whole month of December.
That sounds like somebody who doesn't want to commit to December. I mean, they're on the fence 10 days away. They have a reason to say, what's your cancellation policy? Like, can I reserve this home? It's not a hotel. It's not like a hotel with hundreds of rooms where they overbook because they know people are going to cancel. This is one and only. You have to block it off. You have to block off all of December if you take their booking.
They probably asked 20 people the same question.
Of course. But then also they're saying, don't travel on Thanksgiving, and you're getting such dire, you know, in the next few weeks. I have that compassion because I'm living with it. We all are. So it's like, okay, whatever. I let it go. You know, made an offer, and
that's why they want to run down to P-Town and quarantine there. I mean, it's because the numbers are so bad. People are wanting to get away to our homes where they're safer.
I have a question just for the group, because there's so much demand, I know, revolves around Provincetown with kind of the theme weeks, the Bear Week and Carnival and so forth. Has there been discussion on next summer of those major events? Are those events trying to do something? Are they all, you know, I mean, what's the status with some of those major events? And I'm curious how they're going to impact the demand in P-Town.
They're on the schedule. They seem to be scheduled, and I've already booked Bear Week and Carnival Week specifically for people that say they want to come for that. So
okay,
that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Provincetown is really high compliance. You walk down the street and everybody's wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't there a mandate for downtown P-Town that
Yes,
there
you
is.
must wear a mask?
Yeah.
Very relaxing to see.
Did you find that, Lori, right back in June and July too, early on?
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, it's very, it's relaxing. I actually had some people say that, but you know, they know people will wear masks here.
but I know other places, of course, where there are mandates and people aren't as compliant, but they were really great in Provincetown.
Yeah. I was looking for information about Provincetown 400 because I know there were many events planned, and it was so disappointing that they had to cancel them. But I can't find anything about their planning to celebrate next year instead.
401?
The 400 got moved, the Plymouth one got moved to next year.
Right, it did, but I didn't find any information on the Provincetown Chamber site or even the Provincetown 400 site. If you Google that, it takes you to the monument. But I just don't see that it's been postponed. It just looks like it may have been canceled, which I hope isn't the case, because that was going to be a big deal.
Well, I think some of these major, you know, event managers are going to try to fight it. We know so much more about the virus, and again, maybe there is an easing with the vaccine, ideally, knock on wood, that comes about to make things a little bit easier. But if there are still restrictions, there's likely going to be mask wearing, for example, continuing. So I think it's up to these event managers to plan an event that can allow for folks to partake in it safely. So hopefully that does add to, again, more of a draw. I mean, there's a draw there's a draw despite that, I'm sure, this summer, but it's nice to be able to promote those well-known events to help draw people in. What about just in retain, like a question that I've been asking is just, what have you been doing to get your guests and repeat guests? How do you get repeat guests to come back? Is there anything that you do to help personalize their your efforts to get them to return, and maybe even past summer's guests? How do you get them to return? Are you reaching out to them already?
Helen?
Chris, I know you're waiting until the new year, but are folks reaching out to their past guests to try to get them to come back, and how are you doing so?
I usually send out a Christmas card, which I've always done. That's not something new that I'll do this year, but I send out a Christmas card with something personally written. I don't have that many guests that I can't handwrite something that makes people feel. And it's interesting that after I do that around, like I'll probably do that in the coming week or so, next week or so. It's interesting how there's usually a response from that. Like I feel the sense of people picking up the phone and saying, "Oh, I've been thinking I want to get my booking for next summer," or whatever. It does motivate people, reminds people to start thinking about it. And Christmas is a good time to start thinking of booking for the next summer, especially in P-Town. So
certainly. And you have a 1-bedroom too. So doing that,
Yep.
getting people, if you're getting that, that's great to get it that early. Are other folks sending out anything personal, the email or cards like Jim?
I email everybody, and I've already done that. I'm a little late this year because I just opened up my calendar basically to the, it takes a while to get people's, oh yeah, we're going to decide what we want to do get together with the, family and talk about it. So I try to do it as early as possible, and I always end up doing it later than I want to do it. But because we do get a lot of repeats, and one of the challenges that we did have some long-term renters say, oh, can we come back next year, not come this year? So I have to sort of go back to that, because usually it's right of first refusal. If you stayed in that week, you get the same week next year for us. And so I had to go back and check with those guys that had canceled for this summer, and then kind of shuffle the new people around if they wanted to come back too. So it takes a little while to get it going, because we like to get them booked as soon as possible, and we require a deposit up front, obviously, and the balance due before they come, 60 days before they come. So so that's kind of every year we do the same thing. So
Hey, Jim,
and the repeat renters want to know that they've got their week. They want to know that there's no problem and they've got it, and that it's locked down. So that's another thing to note.
Jim, can I ask what kind of, I'm looking around my camera to see you, what kind of cancellation terms you have for you guys for like Bear Week and Carnival next year?
60 days.
60 days full refund.
Yeah, 60 days full refund. At 60 days, the balance is due. If at 60 days you cancel, but you've only given me the deposit, then I would refund the deposit if it's before 60 days. After 60 days, no refund.
Sorry.
But unless things, are out of control again next summer, God willing. But
and are these returning folks?
One is a returning, and yes, one is a returning, one is a new.
And they're okay with those terms? I mean,
yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Great, good to know, because I have folks for both weeks that I do need to reach out to that have a credit from this year. So
I've always had 60 days, but what I say is if you cancel closer to then, and if I am able to replace the rental,
Yep.
then for an equal or greater amount of money, then I will refund you the difference minus, I think I have $100, fee that I keep or something like that.
Very fair.
Our sample lease suggests 5% that you return everything but 5%. But most of us, if we're able to re-rent it again, we'll just give all the money back. But the lease does cover you, at least if you have to pay more for advertising or the hassle to rebook it and so forth, you can. Do you guys offer a discount to your repeats? That like automatic every year?
Price went up.
If we have renters that have been there for a while, and we decide to go up on the rate for general, we don't usually raise their rate to the new rate. We might split the difference or, kind of work with it that way. So.
And when I write to the mentors, I often say, I want to give you first right of refusal for this week. I won't raise your rate to our new rates. And of course, they don't have to fill out, I require everybody to send me a copy of a government issued ID. And I don't require that again.
Do others of you require some kind of ID like that?
I don't.
You know, it's funny. I also have places in Florida, and in Florida I do, but in P-Town I don't, because
Why?
for whatever, I don't know why really.
I think I know why. I couldn't articulate it either, but I would probably.
P-Town seems a little more like it's a little bit more difficult to get to. I don't know why that seems that way to me, or people don't go to P-Town necessarily to cause much trouble, and in Florida they really do. Florida is a whole different world down here with the rentals. So, and maybe it's just in doing this for 6 years, I can maybe name 1 or 2 times I've had bad experiences with a renter, and that's
It's
it.
almost like Florida's like Vegas or something. You know?
Yeah, a little bit. You know, in Florida, one of the things you get, and I know we're not talking about Florida, but in Florida, one of the things you get is you get a lot of local people who live in Fort Lauderdale who want to rent a place in Fort Lauderdale, which we have stopped doing, because that usually means they want to have a party and they don't want to clean up. That's what it means. So,
Wow.
yeah. So in Florida, we're much more like, who are you? Where are you coming from? Why are you, we ask all those questions. In P-Town, I just doesn't seem like I've had, and maybe that's because I have a 1-bedroom. I mean, how much trouble could someone really be getting into in a 1-bedroom?
Well, yeah, I have a 3-bedroom and
Yeah.
some people and a big deck. So
Yep.
I try to screen for people and say it's a residential area, and my neighbors are very zealous about letting me know about. Nonetheless, I had someone who had a 40-person party in the middle of COVID this summer.
Wow.
There was no damage, but it was a $932 cleaning bill instead of my normal $350 to $400. And this was just a long weekend. They did not get their security deposit back.
Yeah.
Not surprising.
I didn't lose money, but
Is there
Seems like that
anything you
flies
could
in the
have
face
done
of the
to-
restrictions.
oh,
there
there was
anything-
smoking. No smoking is allowed.
Mm.
There was, COVID restrictions. They weren't following those at all. So
Did they push back? Did they get upset when you retained the security deposit? Or?
yeah, they did. I got advice from the cleaning company to give an itemized bill showing
Yeah.
what the costs were. And it came up to $850, not counting the breaking of various rules. And so I said, because you did this, this, and this, you really were breaking the lease. And then they said, well, we're going to contact our lawyer and blah, blah, blah. And I said, you're fine. Let me know how much you think you owe. He said, well, we don't agree with everything you declared. And this again was on the advice of my cleaning company, who has all this experience. And he said, tell them to submit their own. Of course, I never heard from them. He said, you'll never hear from them again. And I didn't.
Yeah.
But some of the costs were all the sheets had to be washed double because there was so much filth in the place. And there was.
Is there anything you thinking back that you could have done to screen them?
No, because I screen them the way I normally do. And maybe they were a little younger than normal, but they were in their 30s.
In the sample lease that we send out, it includes a clause that says the number of people that the home accommodates, but it also says including guests. At least I think it does. And it also says any violation of this will result in the forfeiture of your security deposit, because legally a security deposit is to be used for damages. And if the guests claim they didn't do any damage and you can't find any evidence of it, what you did in this case, Barry, but if they didn't, they could say, well, you can't legally keep my security deposit. But if you include that notation in your lease, then you would be within your rights to withhold the security deposit if they had more than the number allowed at your home.
Well,
but
that's
I think
good
it's
advice.
important to include visitors, because again, they could say, well, you know, we had 40 people there, but no one spent the night. So,
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that was true.
100%, yeah.
Beyond that, you know, there was things like, I do have in my lease, and I recommend this, especially with COVID, if you need that time for cleaning, I have in my lease, if you're not out by the departure time, I charge $150 additional per hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they took an hour and a half to get out. So that was part of the time. And I text the night before to remind them, I text that morning. And so you know, things like that. But this isn't a situation where having his address and having all the people's contact information, because I'd heard from the neighbor that things were not good the night before, and they were knocking on their door, and they had video. My neighbors had video of some guys being in excessive undress and knocking at their door, trying to get in at 2 in. And so I obviously drunk. And what was, I lost my point.
Okay.
Sorry.
Call the police.
Well, they didn't want to call the police because they didn't want recrimination to come to them. And so any possible recrimination, because they didn't know if these guys could get violent. But anyway.
Oh, you were talking about you were glad that you had held on to their contact info.
Because the next day I wanted to reach my renter, the one who was the primary renter. Thank you, Elizabeth. And he was sound asleep until 11 or 12 because he'd been up till 4 and out partying. And so I was able to reach other people on the list who were at the beach, who then got in touch with him, and he then called me. So, and said, oh, there was no problem last night. But the point was I was able to reach them.
Multiple.
Yeah. You
had multiple contacts.
Right. So that was a real advantage of having the contact tracing contacts.
Yeah, good for you.
Thanks,
I know
guys. I gotta run.
All right.
I gotta run to another meeting. Thank you for doing it.
Thanks.
Good to see you,
Thanks,
Ross.
Bye,
Hi,
guys.
Ross.
I think we all agree that there's so many challenges that we face with COVID, but for us homeowners, there are some advantages. I agree with, who was it, Ross, maybe in the beginning, or one of you that was talking about, what was it? Anyway, just many of the things that we've done this year that we kind of, well, the linens, I think it was, that we can continue to do it going forward, and we kind of blame it on COVID, but I know I don't think I would ever go back to providing linens again. So that's just one example. Yeah, Lori, you're not doing it again
No,
either.
I'm just saying that I have to go, so.
Right.
Oh,
Well, we're gonna wrap up here. Lori, thank you for joining us. I do want to just my final question, just for those that are here, and Lori, if you do need to jump off, feel free. Is there anything that We Need a Vacation can do for you? Is there anything that you would like to see from us or help you into the following year? We're going to be doing these Zoom calls on a regular basis, maybe on a monthly basis from here on out, but anything else just before we wrap up that you want to provide some feedback for us?
You know, I'll say one thing that no one has really mentioned, and I experienced this summer a little bit, and it was, it's sort of an awkward topic, but townie rage at people who were doing short-term rentals. And I experienced it in P-Town, you know, not my immediate neighbors, but people that live near me, that know me, that know that I was doing rentals legally. I mean, not during the time that we weren't allowed, but when we were permitted to do them. Someone who worked for me as a cleaner who said they're not going to clean anymore since I'm doing short-term rentals. They were, I just really, and I know P-Town townies they can be a little like that about people who don't really live there, that, you know, there's that whole undercurrent of that. But I really, this summer, I really felt it. I really felt like they wish I had just gone away or nailed my door shut and didn't do rentals. And, you know, I don't know that there's anything specific that, you know, you could necessarily do about that, you know, in terms of what your service you offer, but it is something that I haven't really heard people talk about. And I really felt it this summer. I mean, I really felt like people did not want me and my short-term rental bullshit in town. And it was,
but they love
you know,
your 15% lodging tax.
Well, I mean, that's of course what I say is like, you certainly want your 15% lodging tax, and you want me to pay the cleaners, and you want me to bring the tourism in. You certainly want that, but now you're giving me this. Anyway, it was just like this undercurrent that I felt from people, more so, definitely more so during COVID. That was very.
I think it was the fear factor, Jim,
Yep.
more than anything else, and I don't think that is going to repeat itself this year, because we know so much more, and hopefully it will be under better control by the time spring comes.
Yeah.
But I mean, you heard about the petition that was signed by over 1,000 people to close the bridge
Yep.
to tourists. And I know on the islands, they were very fearful of tourists coming, even homeowners, second homeowners who
Yep.
had every right to be there, but they were afraid of them coming. And you can understand that, but I hope that that's a thing of the past, and you won't feel that same way.
And Joan, I think it was also just the adherence to whatever guidelines there were, the social distancing, the wearing of masks, whoever, was it locals or was it tourists that are coming in that are not adhering? There was the fear that people would not adhere to that, or they walk down Main Street without a mask and so forth. And so maybe those that are coming from outside of P-Town got the bum rap that they are the ones that are not adhering to some of those guidelines. I think what we've did last year, and we will continue to do, is just to promote that, to promote the safety of all the guests that are coming, the respect of those that are in the towns, and just to follow the guidelines. And so that's what we did, is try to educate the guests arriving of just what sort of guidelines there were, whether it be on the beaches, there's still guidelines on the beaches, or guidelines specifically in some of these towns, P-Town, Chatham, Hyannis, all had mask requirements. So education is the best we can do right now, and and so we're going to continue to promote that.
It's not just the townies though. My unit is 4 units in a single house, and one of the owners, they grouped a group and quarantined together and had happy hour every night outside, and I mean a loud happy hour, and smoking pot, which is a whole different story when someone mentioned smoking, because we were always non-smoking. But they were loud until midnight, and this is an owner, and it was a very, very awkward situation when my place has always been quiet, and it's advertised as such, and I understand reasonable noise, and our neighbors were complaining, and they're like, what do we do? And it's a whole different topic. But so not everybody, they said they quarantined together, so they didn't need to wear masks. We have a common courtyard. It was like this, folks, you're not the only ones here. But they really felt that way, and it was kind of the reverse challenge in that case, and it's still sort of going on, and we really can't do anything about it.
So you didn't get the same sense that Jim did as much, that it was kind of this resentment from local?
No, I didn't, but I'm also not there, and I canceled all my weekly rentals. So, but when someone's a long-term rental writing a book, and I said, my place is relatively quiet, and then there are people out there, but it was more about our neighbors were really upset that every night, loud group. It was like a frat party going on, or a sorority party.
It's just basic consideration, whether it's a local person or a tourist,
Don't even get me. It was like, you're adults. Why are we having a Zoom call about, you talking about how drunk you got last night, and everybody in the neighborhood knows. But anyway.
Well, hopefully things do progress, both kind of just with this pandemic and kind of with your own rentals and your bookings, and you do use the opportunity to, and it sounds like you all do, to converse with your prospective guests and figure out, if it's a good fit for you guys for your rentals, and just make sure it's a good match, and hopefully have again another successful season.
Thank you.
So, anything else from Joan, Beto, or any other questions before we drop off?
I have a quick comment.
Sure.
I just want to thank you very much for having these and all of the communication you do. And that made me, and I took advantage of some of that before I became a customer. And then I did a trial, and then I signed up for a full year because of the great service and the great communication and programs you offer. So thank you.
Someone
Thank
said they
you.
were a first-time renter. Are they?
Yeah, it
still
was Tim. I think he just
Oh, I was gonna
said goodbye
say-
on the chat. But
Now with singing praises, yes, because I went through the same thing, Bonnie. I tried it, and much appreciate. This is not Airbnb.
Thank you.
in so many ways.
Well, don't ever hesitate, anyone and anyone who's listening to the recording of this, to contact us, email, call. We're here to help. These have been difficult times, and we just feel that it's part of our job to help give advice when we can and learn from you as well. So,
But we'd also appreciate
channels
any,
of communication open.
but we'd also appreciate any good word that you can put in if you know anybody else who's renting. I'm sure you know tons of other people, but our best source of new business, of course, is from people like you who do have a good experience with us and refer us to other people. So appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you,
Thank
Thank
everybody.
you guys.
Thank
Talk
you.
again.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 All right, happy Thanksgiving.